Exactly what I thought would happen. The fucking his children not getting touched at all. Like, great.
Here we go. I'm ready for that rant. Should we do it?
Yeah, let's do it. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 40k Fireside podcast. I'm David Gaylord, and I'm joined by my good friend Vic Vijay. Together, we discuss 40k and the meta from our perspective, along with events we've recently been to and those that have got coming up. So come on down to the fireside and listen.
All right, guys, welcome back to 40k Fireside, episode number 5. And we are lucky enough to be recording on the very day that the Balance Dataslate has dropped. And our entire episode is going to be pretty much focused around the Balance Dataslate. We're very excited to see this, and hopefully, we can use this as an opportunity to consolidate some of our thoughts. We've really not had too much time to look at it, but we have had a few chats with people, and hopefully you'll find this useful as well. We're going to be doing a little quick update in this part 1 on just what we've been up to with regards to 40k since the London Grand Tournament a couple of weeks ago. And then we're going to move straight on to part 2, which is going to be the bulk of our episode, talking about an overview of the key changes in the Balance Dataslate. We're going to discuss also kind of what didn't get changed and the combination of those two things and how they have impacted potentially the meta, which armies might have gotten a little bit stronger, some may have gotten a little bit weaker. And finally, we're going to finish up this episode by talking about the Coventry Super Major, which is coming up, and where we stand now that we've got a balanced data slate. So, Dave, going to kick it over to you for a little quick update on what you've been up to since the London Grand Tournament.
Yes, so as probably no one knows, but you'll know listening to this now, I'm currently in France. I'm in Bayeux. I've been in France for, I think, 5 days now, and I've had my parents with me for like the last part of this month. Well, actually, they arrived before the London Grand Tournaments from New Zealand, so I told them I had to go play that, but they cheered me on there. But I haven't actually been playing any Warhammer whatsoever. I think the whole game has really been in a stalemate. Everyone has been waiting for the balanced data slate because the meta, to be frank, has not changed very much in the last 3 to 4 months. I would say, obviously, Chaos Space Marines and Emperor's Children coming up there a lot as kind of the one singular change. But apart from that, it's been rather stale, I think. Well, stale is not a good word to use. The meta has been fantastic and balanced, and that's something should be praised. But I think everyone is sort of waiting for a change. So, yeah, I was grateful to see it actually come out today rather than coming out after the Coventry Super Major list submissions, which is going to be tomorrow night. So that's going to be a really interesting Super Major because everyone's going to have only a couple of days to sort out what their lists are going to be in wake of this change in the game. So we're really looking forward to it. I'm excited to kind of come back to 40k as it is right now because I've just been on holiday and not doing much and lazing about. And it's a nice time to come back into the game and really looking forward to it. What about yourself? What have you been up to, man?
Oh, well, you've just stressed me out now because I didn't realize, is the deadline tomorrow night? Oh,
You
my
got to submit
word.
2 weeks before, don't you?
Yeah, well, I was hoping it was maybe Sunday. That would be, but you might be right. So, okay, so I've really got to get on that and start
I mean,
thinking
you're
about it.
submitting the same thing we all know anyway.
Well, you say that, but I mean, there are some thoughts which have come out of this balanced data slate, which we'll touch on later. But I did do over the past 2 weeks. Last weekend, I went to Small GT, a local one of the Glasshammer ones. I've been to this was number 10, and I've been to 8 of them. So it's really my local.
Do you know for
Uh,
the most? Have you attended the most class hammers out of everyone? You might have, right?
Possibly,
10, that's quite a good rate.
yeah, I had a really good tournament. I took the Emperor's Children, made a few tweaks, just added in some few little fun bits there, a little Master of Executions with a Warlord trade, try and get make use of the really heavy terrain at Glasshammer events, and managed to win that one. So came first, got that, and
Congratulations.
thank you. And that puts me as number 1 on Chaos Space Marines, which was actually my goal going into that event.
Ooh.
Just
Ah.
try and go, I think I had to go 3-2
Yeah,
in order to get that first place on CSM for the
nice.
ITC rankings, which is quite nice.
That's
Now
good.
I've got
By the
my
way,
eyes
who,
set.
who did you play last round of the? What was your matchup last round to Glasshammer?
actually, my last day was really interesting
Huh?
because the first round, the fourth game, I played against Ed Watts,
Yeah.
who's one of the savvy submariners. Very, very good player, lovely guy, and he's one of my practice partners. And he played Swift Strike's Eldar list, which
Ah.
is, something which I'm really keen on as well.
He mixes it up. I've
And
seen Ed. He plays a lot of different stuff. I feel like every tournament I see him, he's got something
He
on.
that's yeah, the savvy submariners in general really seem to have a wide range of armies that they play,
Yeah.
and they really play on meta as well.
Yep.
So good to practice against. And yeah, we had a really interesting game where the output of the Swift Strikes list really came into play. He decided to go like he hadn't played against Emperor's Children before, so he went for my Terminators.
Yeah.
He killed 9 out of 10 Terminators in
Okay.
one turn.
Seems good.
Jinx, Doom, I missed one of my spells, and that was his turn to go for it.
Ah,
Put all the mortal wounds in and left one Terminator on one wound.
okay.
Um, so yeah, really brutal output. And
And
then
Jinx is super good against Terminators with AP 0 because you're going to 2 up to 3 up save, right? So you take
exactly.
twice as much damage.
And the Swift Strikes list uses Ignore Cover as its second trait. So
That's
really, really
fantastic.
fast, advancing and battle focusing, and then ignoring cover. So very, very strong. He ended up actually playing Josh Roberts, the one of the England captains,
Mhm.
after me, who was also playing pretty much exactly the same Emperor's Children list. And he kind of learned a few things and did much better in the game against Josh compared to the game against me.
Yep.
My game afterwards, the final game, was probably the most interesting one because I was playing against a Leviathan Nids list,
Mhm.
but not a David Gaylord one, not any Tyranid warriors at all. It was pure mortal wound spam, the German WTC list.
Ah,
It was run by Nathan Roberts, who's one of the final 16 for Team England guys as well.
yep.
Um, had 3 units of 3 zoanthropes, 3 neurothropes, a unit of 3 biovores, and 2 harpies.
Did
And
he have a fortification in there as well?
he didn't have the spore
Oh,
assist.
okay.
I think that's what it's
Yeah.
called. But that thing, oh my god! So I've learned to respect spore mines as potentially being the best unit in the game, in my opinion. They're outrageous amounts of output from those spore mines and so much utility.
Yeah.
He was essentially creating kind of 3D3 spore mines plus three a turn from the harpies as well. So
He also had a Maleceptor in there. That's a crucial
oh
part of that list as
yes,
well. Yeah.
yes, yes. And Malceptor, and then lots of little chaff like some gargoyles
Yeah.
and gaunts and
Yeah.
things. So essentially, the game plan is to kind of move block my whole army and buy himself a turn where he can just smite me away
Yeah.
without really getting interacted with. Very powerful against non-flying armies like mine.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, the thing was, I think I got the pacing right because instead of going for it, which often Emperor's Children CSM players do, I just waited. I spent a whole turn waiting and just spent that whole turn dealing with the harpies that were right in my face.
Yeah.
And I only went in on turn 3 where he had left, like, he had tried to screen me out, but he'd move blocked me, but he hadn't charge blocked me.
Ah,
The
right.
spaces between his gargoyles were enough for me to fit my Terminator bases through.
Ah,
Uh, so I managed to have a turn where I kind of got through everything and tagged 2 units of Zoanthropes and a Neurothrope and the Malceptor.
great.
And yeah, it kind of all just spiraled from there with primary control.
Yeah.
But it was a very useful lesson,
That
like
was
game to play.
the 5 round GT. That was your round 4 and 5, right?
Round 4 and 5, that's
Nice.
correct.
Nice.
So
What
yeah.
did you think of the
Mm.
Spore Mine? I mean, I know that. I mean, you know what's funny is that that's probably the most. Some would argue, not me, that that's a very good counter against CSM, right? Against Emperor's Children or the Spore Mines. But at the end of the day, you can just shoot them off the board, right?
You can, but interestingly, with the spore mines, they can be deployed 6 inches away from your opponent,
Yep.
and that's really awkward for trying to move through them.
Yep.
So incredibly awkward. And just kind of like tucking them in around units, your own units on objective, so
Yeah.
that if
Exactly.
my very slow moving noise marines want to try and charge something on an objective, I've got to be prepared to take, 6 or 7 mortal wounds on the way.
Yeah.
And that's really tough to deal with when it's happening every single turn.
But the thing about that list is,
Uh,
though, that list is not standing on any objectives in the open, right?
correct.
And
So
that's the big flaw, right? Which someone running something like that, when you don't have a big durable brick that is going to be able to stand in the open and survive shooting, you kind of resigned to staying back and holding the backfield objective, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. It is it's a killing list you got to really kill, but
yeah,
it has nothing that survives on objectives, but it has chaff that jumps onto objectives, so it can
right.
deny
But
primary.
you can heroic 3 inches with your army, right? So that's a huge boon against stuff like that.
Yeah, my problem was I was struggled to actually position on objectives because the
Right.
spore mines were there. So it was like a really awkward getting move blocked
What was the
by
score?
like chaff.
What was the score in this game?
I think it was quite close. I think it was something like 88-70.
Okay, so 20
So
points in it, almost 20.
uh yeah, and I mean we were both pretty much tabled by the
Yeah.
end of the game. So
Oh, nice. Well,
yeah,
congratulations. I mean, you played
thank you.
two good guys in the last day as well, right? So it must have been a nice little revamp for the Emperor's Children, right? I mean, you're at this point really, but I mean, you're obviously still learning everything, still learning things every game, but you're kind of
Absolutely.
you're
I'm
it's a bit of a job now, isn't it?
Well, I'm seeing more and more of a very similar type of list to this one that I designed, just popping up all over the place. And, I know generally since LGT, people have become much more aware of the Emperor's Children.
Yeah.
So if anyone does see like 4 or 5 units of Noise Marines in this particular pattern with these HQ choices, please be aware that it was Vic who designed this list. Thank you.
You didn't have to say it. I was going to say
Thank you, everyone.
You didn't have to say it. I was going to say it. As Vic, this is just as we talked about how I kind of heralded the Leviathan Warriors. This list here was definitely the Vic VJ Super 100 because, and I remember the first tournament you took us to was Battlefield Birmingham, right? That you won.
Yep.
Yeah, and this
Mhm.
was the. I mean, you'd been practicing it before then, but this was the first breakout thing. You just straight up won that GT, and then after that, everyone has copied this list as well. And Vic was you were the defining person to kind of illustrate that archetype. So yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me that it's picking up a lot of traction because I always thought this list was very powerful. You could check out. I think even from episode one, I talked about it, right. There's
And that's it.
yeah,
It's been there all the way through our journey.
yeah, I mean, the list is just, it's got everything to it, really, hasn't it? And we'll talk about some things that the list could potentially be improved by in the balanced data slate,
For
because
sure.
there are some innovations upon innovations, if you would call them that, uh, that you can make to this list, but we'll see.
Absolutely.
I think that's,
So
what does that wrap it up
I,
for part one, does it?
I think that's a perfect time to switch over to talking about the balanced data slate.
Well, the balanced data slate, guys, we're going to be covering all in part two, and we'll see you here in a bit. That wraps up part one. We hope you're enjoying listening, and we'll be back shortly with part two. Alrighty, everyone. Welcome back to part two of the 40K Fireside podcast. Great to have you back again. Now we're going to be going through the Balance Data Slate, or as I'm going to call it, the Balance Lazy-Slate, because I don't think, I, well, lazy is a good description of what I think this is, which is a little bit sad to say, but we're going to go through it. They, I think, Vic, as context, I think the last Balance Data Slate came out 3 to 4 months ago, right? Quite a while.
Correct.
So there is a lot of games that have happened over 3 to 4 months, and a lot of meta that has developed, of course. And we're kind of at the end of that meta, so to say. And I feel like we're kind of at the end of the ninth edition meta, if we've got 10th edition on the horizon, so to speak. So this is, as some people have deemed it, likewise for 8th edition, the golden era of the edition. Right? People sort of say that the edition is at the perfect peak during its end days. So this is kind of the context that I see it in. They've had a lot of time to work with this, and a lot of things that they have touched for specific armies have been prevalent for many, many months. So I think that that's the kind of context I'm going to take this in, as if it were my job to do this as well. So I think, but
Okay.
what I would say is, as a point to GW, I think the balanced data slate is not supposed to approach changes in all aspects of the game, as my understanding. But I will have to confer on that one as well, because there are, there are some parts in this balanced data slate that don't touch, or there are parts in this balanced slate that don't exist that perhaps should have balanced the game in different ways as well. So anyway, we'll jump right into it. All right, so we're going to kick it off with the big and bad, which is something that I think people have been wanting for maybe 5 or 6 months. The Tyranid balanced data slate, specifically on Leviathan. So basically, what's happened, guys, is Leviathan is dead. You will not be playing Leviathan Tyranids anymore for two reasons. Leviathan Warriors The Synapse, so the Leviathan core part, transhuman on Synapse units, mini transhuman on non-Synapse units, has now been just changed to transhuman on Synapse monsters, right? So all your toughness 7 and 8 monsters now can only be wounded on 4s if they're Synapse, which is about 3 data sheets total, right? Okay. Basically irrelevant because why would you want transhuman on a T7, T8 body anyway? I mean, waste of time.
Hmm.
Not only that, but they've actually buggered it up here. What they've done is I'm on holiday, so forgive me if I get this wrong, but I think what they've done is they've actually dropped transhuman from warriors entirely because the second bullet point, if I'm not mistaken, only affects units without synapse. So the first bullet
Correct.
point has been changed to synapse monsters, which warriors are not. The second bullet point only affects non-synapse units. So let's just put this in context. Out of my list that I won two super majors with, about 80% of the units that are affected by this ruling, only I think one unit is now affected by it, the Winged Hive Tyrant. The Synapse Harpy is also affected by it as well. So out of my previous army that had almost entire transhuman, I'll have two things that are transhuman, both of which don't really matter because they're T7. And then like warriors don't even get mini transhuman. But why would they want transhuman anyway? Because mini transhuman is useless because they're T5 anyway. So I will just do a ode farewell. Thank you, Leviathan. You've done me very well over the past 6 months. It's been such a pleasure playing it, but I'm not going to be picking it up. I don't think ever again. So that's Leviathan dead. Great. Now they've also touched on the Reaper of Obliterax, and what I would say is I think this change is bang on point. I think they've done a good job of this. Reaper of Obliterax is basically exactly the same, but you can only deal a maximum of 3 additional mortal wounds when you wound people. So you can't go in, hit someone 5 times, 5 additional mortal wounds on the wounding, and then they take 5 saves after that. Which is good because what they've done is they've effectively reduced the overall damage it does, but it still keep the flavor. So you can still beat those phase cap units like Abaddon, but you can't just shed out loads of damage against everyday units and everything in the meta as well. So it's not so much of an all round weapon. I think I'm not sure on the math, but it probably still does like the most amount of damage out of any of the relics. So
Mhm.
that kind of still makes it a bit better than kind of everything. But I really like what they've done here. I think Reaper of Obliterax is a great change. Yeah.
I think, yeah, I think you've covered it really nicely there. I think Reaper of Obliterax is still an extremely powerful relic, and I think the Winged Hive Tyrant jumping in and out because they haven't made any changes to Overrun, as they probably shouldn't have to. I think he's still one of the best units the Tyranids have access to,
Yeah.
regardless of getting a little nerf on Reaper.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
think he's still like he was very strong beforehand. You
mhm.
could go into Tau Crisis suits, blip, delete, etc., etc. But he's just toned down a little bit, and they've done it in a good way because they haven't increased his points. And that's like okay, there's better ways to adjust things in points as well, which is great. I'll let
Yeah,
you
correct.
take the impact on this one. So Harlequin's light Sedith has been changed. So each time a unit with this characterization makes a normal or move or advance in your movement phase, in your following shooting phase, that unit also counts as having remained stationary. This does not apply if the unit is embarked in a transport. So what does this actually? How does this actually affect the game, Vic?
Yeah, so this is really interesting because a big reason why light was so powerful, and I mean, it's three part really. Initially, it was that they could only be hit on fours. They had kind of a trans-hitman effect on every single unit.
Yeah,
That got nerfed slightly, and now they could only be hit on fours if they were outside of 18 inches, rather than 12 inches, which is a fair nerf.
yeah,
The second thing, which they didn't nerf, was the light stratagem, which was if you're charged, you can move 6 inches away with a
yeah.
unit for one
Mega
CP.
strong.
Very strong, and that still remains. The third thing, which I think is what pushed light Harlequins to being the best Harlequins, was that you could essentially load up 7 to 8 Harlequin transport boats, the Starweavers, with 5-man units of troops that could have 2 fusion pistols, 2 neuropistols, and the last guy would throw a plasma grenade. Grenades are quite good for Eldar.
Mhm.
Um, and you can move those units in the transports 22 inches and then shoot. It gave you a huge amount of ability to get around corners, apply a lot of threat saturation, and essentially create a situation where you have units within transports sitting on objectives to control primary if they're targeted or shot. the combination of all of these things, on top of having good secondaries, made light Harlequins one of the best armies in the game.
Mhm.
And alongside NIDS, they were sitting at the highest win rate, which is quite interesting thing that we can touch on, how they've used win rates as their targets for
Yes,
adjustments,
yes.
which has mean they've hit some of the right things, but potentially also missed some of the things that have gone under the radar.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so by changing this so that the units inside the transport can't shoot after that the transport has advanced, means that you're really reducing the threat range
So
of light
a
harlequins.
fusion pistol, which is most of the things that I care about, and probably what most
Mhm.
of what you need to care about. Fusion pistol range is like 6 inches, is it?
Yeah, 6 inches on that, 12 inches on the neuropistol, and 6 inches on the plasma grenade. So
If my opponent
yeah,
has a Star Weaver, they can only
mhm,
now. Previously, they could move 22 inches and shoot 6. Now they
mhm,
can only move 16 and shoot 6, right?
correct. So they've dropped 6 inches off the threat range, which is
Which is great.
actually pretty
Great.
huge.
That's huge because pistols are pretty hard to get in general. They weren't easy. They weren't a given. So I think this is a good change. They didn't hit the whole thing. They didn't over nerf it. I think that's a good.
Yeah.
I think it's fair due, right?
What it kind of opens up is light the best kind of subfaction to take for Harlequins, and
Mm,
potentially it's not, because dark has already been nerfed. Their fight on death has been significantly reduced in power. Now light has taken this nerf where you can't advance and shoot weapons out of the transports, and that's probably their most powerful thing.
yep.
That leaves Twilight as the last one. And I actually had a feeling that Twilight was very strong anyway, because Harlequins, by purely kind of putting all of their output into shooting and really dropping down their combat potential, which is kind of what was happening. People were
Yep.
dropping all the combat weapons out of their Harlequin troops, left them with a weakness where they couldn't actually punch through things.
Yep.
Twilight gets around that. They get +1 attack, they get a great stratagem to auto wound on sixes. You can end up with units that actually punch hard enough.
Yeah.
So I'm expecting to see a lot more Twilight pop up in the meta.
Yep, and it's always like everything, like with every army, Tyranids included, but Harlequins especially is that it depends what the meta is. So sometimes light's better, sometimes dark's better, sometimes twilight's better, and it's got great adaptability, flexibility. So yeah, we'll have to see how it bounces around in the end. I think
For
light still
sure.
seems pretty strong. The shooting packages for light are really good. I had a game at LGT against a guy, and the shooting on Star Weavers is pretty sick as well. Like Star Weavers have a nutty profile for 95 points, right? Like
Yeah.
that is a
I
good
mean, I
gun.
think because Star Weavers do have two shuriken cannons,
Yep.
which are 24 inches, you can probably play that comfortably without having to advance and shoot it.
Yeah, exactly right.
So you don't necessarily need light. Light is essentially you're playing light just to get the stratagem to run away 6 inches, which admittedly is quite powerful. But
That's quite good. Yeah.
I, I mean, my money is I think Twilight and Yanari, so Harlequin troops in Yanari,
Yep.
are going to be the two kind of stronger builds which people are going to go for.
Yeah, and I think Yanari has kind of been popping up for the last month and a half, hasn't it? Really, people have been toying with it more and more and more, and I'm kind of waiting for that breakout game where Yanari is going to be good, and I think when that is going to happen is when Tyranids become less popular for sure.
For sure. I was meaning to ask you
Mhm.
before we move too far away from the Tyranids. Do you think with Leviathan dying, what's kind of the strong ways of playing Tyranids? Just like a hot take.
Hot take. I'm going to give that to you when we talk about what we're thinking for Coventry.
Oh, okay. So potentially still Tyranids. All right, got it.
I'm in two mindsets. Don't worry about that. Adeptus
All right.
Astartes. So this is all Marines as I kind of read it. Shock Tactics, you get 4 VP instead of 3. Is that correct? Shock Tactics used to be 3, right?
I genuinely have no idea.
I'm
I'm
pretty sure
sorry,
it used
Space
to be.
Marine players.
But I think the resounding point here is that what I would like to point out is that this is a secondary change. Okay, so they are
Mhm.
capable of making changes to the secondaries of armies in the balance data slate because they've clearly done that right here. What I would secondly say is this is the only secondary change in the whole balance data slate, which I think if you ask 9 out of 10 people, secondaries would have been one of the most common things that they would have expected to change, right? We're talking
Yeah.
Necrons, Sisters, even Harlequins, and AdMech secondaries are awful. That's kind of what people were expecting. So, okay. So, congratulations, Space Marines players. If you want an extra VP in your shock tactics, you got it.
Yeah,
It's still not a great secondary.
that's really rough. I mean,
You know what's weird is,
gosh.
you know what I will say is they talked about making Space Marines better and better leading
Mm.
up to this balanced data slate, and they haven't done that at all. So that's disappointing. I think if you showed up with just this and you said, "Well, we're going to make a big impact on these lower armies," like it's not that big of a. Yeah,
I mean, I've kind of applauded GW for their creativity with these balanced data slates. I think they've come up with some very kind of interesting ways of correcting things. For example, like Armor of Contempt, limiting flyers, their corrections to indirect fire. These are all very like powerful changes that they've created, which are not obvious for players to come up with themselves. This one for Space Marines seems really like it doesn't make
yeah.
sense. They haven't done anything. And
Where's the creativity in this?
nothing. There's no creative. They've added a single extra point of VP. Oh, it's almost like, okay, give them something. It doesn't matter. And it's like the tiniest thing that makes no difference.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shame,
It's a bit of a shame because I
unfortunately,
know a lot of their customer base is obviously Adeptus Astartes, as we all know, is probably the most popular faction, right? Well,
for
super
sure.
faction, right? So that's whew, that's a bit, that's a bit rough, boys. Let's jump on to the next one, which is an army that I used to play a lot of, Adeptus Mechanicus, which reads: All changes to the Adeptus Mechanicus from previous Balance Data slates have been removed. Right. So what this sounds incredible, but what it actually, because Adeptus Mechanicus got nerfed like 4 times in a row. And we all played in 2020, and when Admic
Yeah,
was well, Malagam and Rubio, our teammate, and somewhat to an extent myself, were ruining people with Admic for a living.
for sure.
That army was so sick. But yeah, so what this actually means, guys, is they've removed the changes to enriched rounds. Which, if you were going to pick anything, why would you change this one? Because this. This gave them so much problems when it came out, unbelievable. So enriched rounds is back to auto winning on 4-ups and 1 CP. I mean, if you were going to try and ease the waters at all, that's probably not the one you would want to unnerf. And then they unnerf the second one as well, which is that Lucius now stacks with cover. Now, that may not sound like a lot, but when you're playing a 4-up save model, you get +1 save because you're in cover, and then you get +1 to save because you're damage 1. All of a sudden, your Scutari are mega tanky, and this was one of the things, Lucius stacking with cover, that they, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's one of the first ones that they nerfed, because it was just like, Scutari ranges were impossible to shift, because you also have Transhuman, Fallback and Shoot, Ignore AP 1 and 2, and then the Telemetry Fire Point Cache, which is the massive buff on this, is that your unit counts as in cover, and it gets +1 save for being in cover. So we're back to potentially Immortal Scutari, which is okay, and then we're back to potentially having enriched rounds, which is, I mean, yeah, it's quite bizarre to me that they picked these two things to unnerf, because these were the two most oppressive things in the entire codex, in my opinion. Um,
So, what haven't they reversed? Have they not reversed like the core changes on the chickens and
so
things?
chickens still get core; they got that in the previous Balance Data Slate.
Ah,
What they
okay,
haven't
got it.
changed is all of the points costs. So there was about 4 iterations of points increases to things like Scutari Rangers and Rust Stalkers, infiltrators, and everything like that. So all the Sakaran stuff. So well, it'll be interesting to see where Admech land. I was very tempted, of course, to start building lists for Admech straight away after seeing this. But
Hmm.
at the end of the day, their secondaries are horrible. So Admech
Hmm.
secondaries, no bueno. And this is another. This is if the changes for Space Marines were lazy, I think this is another lazy one. If I'm being honest, they had so much room to just simply increase. Like for example, let's say this: if they took the same philosophical approach of Adeptus Astartes as they did Adeptus Mechanicus, increase the secondaries, make them score more points. That's absolutely
Hmm.
fine. No one would be complaining about that, right? It would be perfectly fine. In fact, you might actually make the army more dynamic. And though secondaries are one of the places where armies have a lot of identity as well. So making them more pronounced in the game, I think, is a really good way of changing and changing how strong the army is, right? So, I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, sounds like maybe. Well, I mean, you're the expert on this one, and it sounds like maybe they missed the mark on
Yeah,
this.
I mean, you were playing Age of
Um,
Sigmar. Just to context, Vic was playing Age of
I,
Sigmar when I was
I,
playing Advic and playing.
yeah, I dropped out of the game. It was that painful to play against orc buggies and admech
Yeah.
flyers.
I think there is a list in AdMech still where it's like 80. It's like 60 ranges, like 40 ranges, 20 Vanguard, like 8 to 9 chickens, 2 marshals, manipulus, and then like a Dune Rider with Rust Stalker package or maybe 2 Rust Stalker units or something like that as well. And yes, but I don't think you're going to be playing the planes. I think, and as Mono Lucius Battalion as well, and I think a non-Skitarii veteran cohort probably as well. In my opinion, you want to use all the
Sure.
CP, but I think but the secondaries are very rough. And here's the thing, also, is that Enriched Rounds back when it came out was insanely good, right? You're playing
Mm.
the only other great army in the game at the time was Drukhari, right? So guess what? Auto win on 4 up. You can fire hose like 4 units at once. It was mental. But the game has changed a lot since then. The game has changed a lot, and
Mm.
guess how many Terminators 1 brick of auto wounding 4 up Skitarii veterans kills?
I think we did the maths on this. It's not good. How many is it,
It
Dave?
kills one Terminator. Like,
uh,
granted, knowing that you're probably not going to solar flare and shoot into Terminators, right?
yep,
But
for sure.
that just shows how much the game has changed since
Yeah.
we've played it, right? Later.
Armor of Contempt, people generally running around with higher armor saves.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
things have changed.
how would Admech ever deal with Abaddon the Despoiler? Right? You wouldn't, right? Yeah,
No,
I mean, you just
nothing.
follow.
They operate in 2 phases. That's it. And
Exactly.
even then,
Even then,
melee's.
basically one phase,
You
yeah.
know. Yeah,
Yeah, so Admech, I think, and win rate's going to increase, but, now you would hope. But, at the same time, I wouldn't be picking it up anytime soon.
for
On
sure.
to the
Makes
last
sense.
one, Necrons. Now, I think this is one that everyone was like, cool. The core keyword is not added to Necron vehicle datasheets with the character keyword. So this hits off the top of my head two things. It hits the Catacomb Command Barge, great,
Hmm.
and then also it's the Silent King. I think this is a great change. I think they could have gone a little bit further with Necrons, but the UKTC meta brings their win rate down a little bit, and I think people are just prepared against playing against Necrons now. But I think this change in particular is really good. I think it's very targeted, makes sense. But a lot of people would have been talking about, well, the secondary is going to be changing a little bit. I don't know. What do you think?
I think the problem is there's such a difference in playing Necrons in America and playing Necrons in the UK. And in America, a lot of their very large events use Games Workshop terrain with big U shaped terrain pieces only in the deployment zones.
Yep,
And then there's a big open space in the middle. That really sets up for Necrons to play their secondaries without being interacted against.
yep,
You can't kill enough of their armies before they score 100 points. Whereas in the UK, our terrain set tends to be less kind of linear and obvious like that. It tends to be spread out across the board, and there tends to be firing lanes where aggressive armies can get into Necrons. And we've found from our own experience at LGT that Necrons die if you run at them,
yep,
and you can actually shoot them and punch them because their data sheets are a little bit weaker. So I think they might have struggled to balance here. And I think they've done the right thing. They've just reduced kind of the interactions with the Silent King a little bit, made him a little bit worse.
yep,
But I would have loved to have seen a touch somewhere on the secondaries, either by correcting the OBSEC sub faction trait, where maybe you only make core units
yep,
uh, gain OBSEC, which would have been interesting. Or potentially you could have changed the secondary so that they're in the correct categories. At the moment they have a battlefield supremacy secondary, which is not really a battlefield supremacy secondary, something
exactly.
like that, so yeah, I think one more little tweak would have been good just to cover the American meta, because I think Necrons is still unbelievably strong
Yep.
in GW terrain.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I would have liked to have seen Scarabs had their unit size limited. Ooh, that's a hot take.
Oh, I mean, I just think they should not gain OBSEC. That's what they
Yeah,
need.
yeah, you could do that. Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be good.
because if because then they can't do that stupid treasures
Yeah,
thing, whatever that secondary is where they do an action,
yeah.
because that is nonsense that scarabs can do that.
It's like a mindless swarm, right? Yeah, great. All right, guys. So
Exactly.
so that's actually the entirety of the Balance Dataslate. I'm sure if you've listened to this podcast, you're probably clued up. You've probably already seen it. So we've got Tyranids, Harlequins, Space Marines, like sure, Adeptus Mechanicus. Okay, great. Necrons. So we talked about this and we said Tyranids, Harlequins, Necrons all needed to get a touch, and they did. I think. What do you think got the harshest nerf out of all this?
I think probably light harlequins just got removed. I think Leviathan Nids is there's probably going to be some people who can still get some success just on the power of the data sheets with that, not with Tyranid Warriors, but with some other stuff.
Yeah.
Potentially, but it's not going to be winning super majors or anything like that.
Yep. I think the only use
Uh,
for Leviathan now is the fact that you get access to the Psychic spell, which allows you to put a unit in the specific synaptic imperative, which means that you can put 5 up invulnerable on a specific unit for the whole game.
Sure. Do you not think that they still play double harpy really nicely?
Uh, well, I think Leviathan is one of the worst factions to play double harpy in. Because remember, there
Interesting.
are a lot of other factions that you can play double harpy in, right? You can play double harpy in Chronos, so you get additional AP and half range.
Hmm.
You can play double harpy in Kraken, which means that, well, basically that dash sheet doesn't mean anything. But what you can also play harpy in like Jormungandr, and then so those are the other two I think right off the bat for specifically for the harpy, which I think are
Sure.
also which are better than Leviathan if you're not playing Leviathan once per game, once per turn reroll.
So that sounds like you potentially think Leviathan Nids got hit the hardest from this?
I think so. I think considering I genuinely think, and I potentially am the foremost expert on this archetype, I
Hmm.
think I would never play it after this. No, I think it's
Interesting.
completely donezo.
Yeah, and it's very interesting to hear your opinions because you're like you see it very clearly. Like this isn't good. Done.
Yeah,
Move on. Find something else. You don't faff about with stuff that's suboptimal.
yeah. Well, the
So,
fundamental part is that Leviathan gave Tyranid warriors -1 to wound up to 4, because
mhm,
T5 you're never getting wounded on twos, unless it's strength 10, right? Okay, who cares? But for T5, you were constantly being wounded on threes, right? For the stuff that could deal 3 damage. So that's why it
mhm,
was really powerful. Um,
correct.
in fact, -1 to wound on Tyranid Warriors would have been even more powerful because the exact same situation would have occurred. Because the amount of times you go from wounding on threes to fours is
Mhm.
incredible. The amount of times you go from wounding on twos to threes is not doesn't really happen that often.
Let me tell you, T5 -1 to wound is awfully powerful, Dave.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Well, exactly right. Because everything that wounds on fours goes to fives. Everything that's strength four wounds on sixes is mental strong.
Correct.
So yeah, Leviathan. It's been nice knowing you. I think a lot of people in the community are going to be really happy about that. And I think that I think it's warranted. I would have liked to have seen them done it a different way, but what that does indicate to me is that perhaps Tyranids are not getting points increases. But anyway, we'll go down that rabbit hole. What is not in? Have you got the balanced data slate in front of you, Vic?
I've got the balance data
Uh,
slate in front of me, and I've got their faction win rate chart in front of me.
Okay, cool.
And I think that's the interesting point because they've got Tyranids and Harlequins 59%, 58% win rate, respectively,
Mhm.
at the top of the chart. And at the bottom, they've got Adaptus Astartes, Space Marines, and AdMech at 39% each
Right.
at the bottom of the chart. And they've just hit those, and they've left every other faction in the middle
So apart from
untouched.
Necrons also got touched.
Oh, yes, Necron's got,
There are
yeah,
still
Necron's
exceptions.
randomly did.
Yeah.
Sure. But otherwise, there were no other changes.
Yeah.
And for me, when I look at this, I look immediately at the middle of the chart. There are two factions at 50%
Yes.
in this,
That perhaps are a little bit better than what GW think.
which have gone under the radar through this because Chaos Space Marines and Tau Empire have taken no changes from this balanced data slate, which is I think is going to be very interesting going forward. I don't know what your take is on the factions that were missed, Dave.
Yeah, I'll go through it. So I think Adeptus Sororitas was a miss. I think they should have done something about that. I think on the US
Mhm.
open terrains, Sisters of Battle are a little bit uninteractive in their secondaries. I would have liked to have seen that. I think secondary is a very common theme that we're going to be talking about here. I think
Mhm.
that went under the radar. I think no, I think that was on the radar. I think they just chose not to do it. So I think
Yep.
there was probably some balances to Bloody Rose maybe that could have been made that potentially could have forced more faction diversity, perhaps instead of touching the secondaries. But I don't play them, but I would like to.
100%. I agree. I think this is my problem with this entire data slate. There is so much opportunity when the metas. Oh, see, this is the thing, Dave. Right. So everyone listening, the meta is in a great place. They
Best
have
place to
made the
be.
decision to allow the meta to continue being in a great place. But what they haven't done is taken the opportunity to make the meta even better, improve diversity within the meta, improve internal balance rather than just maintain external balance.
Yeah,
And by that, I mean with Sisters of Battle. Why not, improve Order of Our Martyred Lady or Order of Argent Shroud? Make some of these sub factions show up and not just be Bloody Rose everywhere.
yeah,
Tone down the secondaries a little bit and improve the power of the subfactions.
yeah,
There's so much opportunity to do this in so many different ways, and they could have done this across a number of different factions here.
definitely.
But Unfortunately, they've gone very, very light on this, so we continue to pretty much sit in the same meta, is how I feel.
All right, we'll talk about that later.
Oh,
We've
oh,
got Chaos Demons, which I think
yes.
needed desperately. And this is, guys, this is foreshadowing what is to come. For those
Mm,
that don't know, Chaos Demons desperately needed an FAQ or Balance Data Slate on how their faction soups into other factions, because currently it is broken. And I know there are people out there that are going to abuse how the book is written, and I think it's
mhm,
very clear that it is not how the book is intended to play. And I
mhm,
personally will not be involved in building lists like that because I think it's very disingenuous interpretation of the rules. So currently, you can soup Zinch Flamers, or you can actually soup rules as written any part of demons into any Chaos Space Marines army, and basically retain the both parts of the army, which I think is very clearly not the intent of the design philosophy of the book. I
100%.
think the design intention of the book is exemplified in a list like Liam VSL's, where he won a tournament in France. I think it was France, playing Thousand Suns and Zinch Flamers. Now that's very
Mhm,
clearly how the book is supposed to come together with Thousand
mhm.
Suns and Zinch. There are people that are going to abuse how this book can slot into other books, and I think that was a very sad thing to miss in the update here. I think
Ah, yeah.
that's
I wish they were really reactive with that because at the moment, if you take Thousand Sons of Death Guard and soup in, like in Thousand Sons, if you soup in some Corn Demons, the rules work correctly. You lose army wide rules for that.
yep,
But unfortunately, there's a little kind of exploit in the rules where you can kind of bend it. You've got to spend 3 minutes explaining it. So you've got to explain it every single opponent and your TO before you go to the event. But Emperor's Children can take non Slanesh demons and not actually lose anything raw,
yep.
which is sad.
Yeah, it's a shame that they missed that one, and it's
Yeah,
a shame that they didn't FAQ a bunch of the other demon stuff. But that's in the FAQ, not the balance data slate. I
for
think
sure.
demons are a really cool faction all around, and we'll try to chat about that later. Then we've
Yeah.
got. I'm just going to run down the win rates here. We've got Adeptus Custodes. I think they're in a fine place. If not, they get brought up a little bit, but armies are being brought down that predator them, so I think they're going to come up a little bit. Chaos Knights and
Mhm.
Imperial Knights. I think some people would have liked to see the secondaries get changed. I think you could make an argument for that, but I think if GW are just looking at the win rate, then they're not going to do that. Drakari, Asurani, fine. Then we've got Chaos Space Marines and Tau. So I completely agree with you, Vic, of course. And we talked about this in the previous episode that actually Chaos Space Marines and Tau are extremely strong right now, and a very good pilot's hands. And with more people playing them,
Mhm.
both these factions will hit, I think, the 55+% win rate, especially with armies like Tyranids and Harlequins actually getting nerfed. I think these two armies' win rates, I think Chaos Space Marines could approach the 60%. And I think if you look at very recent results, they actually do approach and succeed 50% win rate, 60% win rate, sorry. So that's a very sadly missed opportunity there. And then bringing up some of the other sub factions, I think Gene Stealer Cult could have done with some things. That would have been nice to see. Although that list did perform well at WTC. I think Orcs are in a nice place. Adeptus Astartes, yeah, they could have been so much more nuanced in how they brought that stuff up. Death Guard, give Death Guard some stuff. I mean, come on, Astra Militaris, give them some stuff as well.
I do think that all of these factions are roughly in the right place. They could have been a bit interesting and mixed it up, but
Yeah,
they're probably, about where they should be
yep.
almost.
So, do we not cover anything that you think has been missed? So just to summarize, we think the souping of demons, Chaos Space
Mhm.
Marines, and Tau Empire all are big misses by not getting touched in the balanced data slate, and specifically the internal balance of the Sisters Codex is probably needs to get adjusted as well, right?
Yes, I agree. I agree with all of those points. I just wish they were creative
Yeah.
in picking out random things you can't even think about.
Yep.
Like, let's suddenly make this sub faction like a
Mhm.
little bit better.
Yep.
Let's bring this one a little bit down. Let's bring this unit up.
Yeah.
Let's bring up some Drukari like beasts or something. Make them a little bit better.
Yep.
Just something just to mix it up. When they're within this bracket of 45% to 55% win rate factions, um, you can just move things around within that without making things broken and
Yep.
just keep mixing up the meta, which is actually really interesting and fun to play with.
Yeah. So the meta here's the most important question: do you think the meta is going to be better or worse than what it currently is?
See, I already gave my opinion. I thought that the meta is going to be almost identical to where we are at the moment.
In terms of how do you quantify that?
In terms of, I think the types of armies you see and the factions of armies you see are going to be pretty much static. There's going to be little fluctuations as, say, good players pick up armies and they get copied. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if people started copying Nas a little bit in the UK because he did really well with Tau, for example. You're already seeing it with Emperor's Children. You saw it with you playing Tyranids.
Mhm.
That's always going to be there with affecting the meta. But I think the core armies you see are still going to be roughly the same. There's not going to be anyone which has really come out of the woodworks here with this change.
I think the meta is going to get worse, and
Ooh.
the way I quantify that is the diversity of top fours, diversity of top eights in the super majors. I think
Mhm.
that Cal Space Marines are going to absolutely dominate those numbers. I would be very surprised if it was anything different. I think Creations of Bile not getting touched,
Mhm.
now being able to
True.
soup in Zinch Flamers. I think Emperor's Children with Zinch Flamers, insert X Cal Space Marine army with Zinch Flamers is going to be incredibly strong. I think that's going to be. I, I genuinely think that, especially for UK, especially for UKTC, that is going to be a very dominant faction. I think it's clear to me right now that if it wasn't the best before, that's the best faction for UKTC currently. The fact that its natural predators have been toned down, Harlequins have been toned down. That's just a huge. I mean, what is that other than a buff, right? In the balanced data slate, they've nerfed one, two, three of the big factions, and then
Mhm.
indirectly, that's a buff to everyone else. And two of these factions were already one of the top, if not two out of the three top factions. So, in
Mhm.
my opinion, they've actually buffed two out of the three top factions. That's the way I look at it, at least.
Very interesting. I mean, I agree with you. I think Creations of Bile plus Flamers, Emperor's Children plus, you should not add Flamers, but if you did add Flamers, that's very powerful. Creations of Bile actually can add Flamers legally. They're not god locked, so they can take any demons, which is nice. And I think people were playing Creations of Bile plus Flamers before, but now we've gone through a balance update with no change to Creations of Bile.
Yeah.
So I think a lot more people are going to jump onto that now that they know that they've got 3-4 months, probably even longer, where they're going to keep their
Yeah.
fight on death.
I've actually heard a rumor that there's a points update in January.
Ooh, far
January.
away, very far away.
3 months away. Come on,
Mm.
man. I mean, oh man. I usually not. I'm usually a very optimistic person, but I mean that seems very. I mean, there has to be something coming up before January, right? Because
So
if this is the case, then yeah, it's gonna be a bit dry.
I, I mean, I agree with you. I think Chaos Space Marines are going to be very good in the meta. I think they're going to move up to one of the top tier factions. But I also think there's a little bit which has been missed here because Chaos Space Marines is a lot like Leagues of Votan in the sense that it plays in a linear way. It has no indirect fire, no flyers, and it doesn't play out of Deep Strike.
Mhm.
That immediately means that if you hide behind a wall 1 inch from the wall at a certain distance, you can't be interacted with. That opens up opportunities to play against armies like Emperor's Children if you tailor your army for it.
Yep.
The thing which stops those armies from being successful, and particularly I'm thinking of armies like Drukhari or Eldar or Sisters, very fragile MSU armies, is flyers.
Yep.
They may have toned down a little bit on the number of harpies we see in the meta,
Yep.
but we've probably toned up the number of Sunshock bombers we see in the meta.
Yep.
Emperor's Children do much better into armies with flyers than they do into armies with loads of little MSU all over the board.
Yep.
So I think the combination of everything is working very much in the favor of Chaos Space Marines.
Mhm.
It just depends how much of the meta they end up occupying and whether it's worth countering them
Yep. And
with things like Swift Strike Eldar.
yeah, I'll let you touch on that in a second. And because I'm going to
Hmm.
bump in here. I 100% agree with you, and you've touched on something really important as well. I
Hmm.
100% agree with you. And what is actually going to happen? And this I saw this happen because I was kind of, I guess, pioneering this build. All the conversations were, but how does it do against Tyranid Leviathan warriors? This
Hmm.
is the damage output, but is that good into Leviathan warriors? And I feel I feel like the situation's already changed a little bit in terms of like, well, how does that do into Chaos Space Marines Terminators? You know,
Hmm.
how does that do into Abaddon? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So there is a it's not always best to be the number one faction on the leaderboard, right? Because at the same time, you have a lot of people gunning for you, right? Everyone's sort of in your everyone's got you in their crosshairs. So there's a downside to being the top army in the meta, and that most people will meta against you as well. So it'll be
Mhm.
interesting to see how Chaos Space Marines do against that. One thing I would correct you on is that when you said if Chaos Space Marines are a top faction, they are now. I think they were certainly and winning London Grand Tournament with 2 out of the 4 in the top 4. I think only proves that they were most definitely a top tier faction, if not the best faction in the game on UKTC, guys, on UKTC, because that's what we talk about here on the 40k Fireside. Yes, interesting. Hmm.
I mean, where do you think the kind of like you said a lot of the top fours are going to be static? Do you think it's going to be like all Chaos Space Marines? Is that the level you're talking
I
about
think it'll
here?
be 50%. I think at least 50%.
Oof.
Yeah.
Dave, you're going in strong on this, man. I mean,
Why would you not play it? It's great. I mean, it's a fantastic army.
I think the army is extremely strong, right? Both Creations of Bile and Emperor's Children, but they come with weaknesses, and I think weaknesses can be exploited. So it'll be very interesting to see the proportion of, say, like very successful players who pick up Chaos Space Marines and play them to success,
Yep.
and B, how the rest of the meta adapts to it. Because I have a feeling big point of weakness in all the Emperor's Children list, guys, for anyone listening to this who wants to try and handle Emperor's Children, is the noise marines are the point of weakness because they can be killed and they are fairly expensive, even if they are brilliant for their points cost. So you can end up with a situation like what I have had against Ed Watts with his Swift Strikes list, where you just have the Terminators left,
Hmm.
and sure, it's a very stressful game where you're managing your resources, but you can win that game. And I think top players can handle Emperor's Children if they build their list correctly.
Yeah.
It's just we haven't been building our list correctly. We've been building our list for Tyranids and Harlequins. We haven't been building it for Chaos Space Marines. So
No,
let's see.
you're completely right. Yeah, the sun has not eclipsed on them yet, so we'll have to see how it turns out. And the meta is a fickle thing. We'll have to see how they perform when everyone's got them in their sights on their target, because there are ways to certainly target it. That's for sure.
Personally, I am looking at both Tau
Hmm.
and also Thousand Suns with Flamers as two other factions which I think are going to be extremely strong in the meta, like right up there. Um, I, I think those two and Chaos Space Marines are going to be my pick for top three factions going forward.
Yep. Makes sense to me. I think you're right. One thing that I was going to say I forgot is that it'll be interesting to see how well Chaos Space Marines do if they are very popular. How well their win rates and top 4 rates as a relative percentage of their player base do compared to Tyranids, right? Because a lot of people just said Tyranids face roll. It's so easy. Put everything in the middle of the board. You just charge everything. Blah 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 blah. Your data sheets are so strong. Get out of here. I win the game.
Mhm.
So I don't think Emperor's Children plays that much differently from it personally. The game plan is pretty straightforward in my opinion. So it's going to be interesting to see how well that army translate for newer players getting into the army, and whether or not they can translate that to a high win percentage. And it'll be interesting to see how many people pick it up. Right? If you're listening to this podcast, it's a fantastic army. I'm personally thinking, if I had the bottles, I would play it. It's really powerful. But yeah,
So what are you saying, David? So I know I mean, I personally don't like win rate too much, as easy as it is to discuss with it. I mean, I like stuff like overrepresentation data and things like that a bit more. But
yeah.
for the sake of the listeners and for ourselves, in terms of win rate, what are you putting Chaos Space Marines Tau Empire at?
I'm putting Chaos Space Marines at 60% win rate.
Okay,
And
and Tyranids down.
Tyranids down to 53%. Oh, that's so hard. Hard
Whoa.
thing.
Let's see, right? I'm gonna hold you to
And
these.
then Tau, I think Tau. Here's the thing. Tau will stay the same. Tau will
Mhm.
go to like 52%, 53%. Maybe if people pick up more Sunstruck bombers, it'll go higher. But but I don't know if Tau are actually are they good into everything else? It's tough to say. Um, I think the problem is Tau. I think takes a bit of a good pilot to work with as well, so I think that will hinder its win rate. Its win rate's going to go up because of everything. Its two big natural predators got nerfed, so that's good. Chaos Space Marines, I think maybe they won't be 60% win rate, but they will comprise a very large number of the top fours, and they will be winning GTs and whatnot, like Tyranids were winning over the last, say, month, for example.
Definitely. I think I agree with you on that. I think the only one which I think will confuse us is that I think Harlequins will go up in win rate.
Yeah.
Because I think the way this is all set up, I think Twilight Harlequins are going to come out really strong out of this. And I think anyone who can play that should just run it, and you'll realize that you're going to win most of your games just by being Harlequins.
And I think, they're still fast, they still hit hard, they're
Hmm.
still tougher to kill than you ever think, so,
Hmm.
that's great. And I think mortal wounds are at a bit of a premium at the moment, so that's good news as well. And that kind of
Yeah.
leads us on to, I guess we're talking about the meta. We've got the Coventry Super Major coming up. I don't know, let's just say, hypothetically, the list submission is tomorrow night, because I think it's 2
Hmm.
weeks from when the tournament starts, so, if we're assuming that, it'll be tomorrow night for us. What
Yep.
are your current thoughts as of right now, Vic?
So I'm 50-50. I was really hoping that Tau Sunshark Bombers would disappear completely. So something would happen to Flyers in this, because that would immediately make me play Eldar. Because I want to try and get number one on Eldar and ITC
Okay, okay.
rankings, and I'm an event short of it. And I personally, I feel my Eldar list can beat my Emperor's Children list. Like almost every time, I think I'll get that
But
game on equal skill level.
Can it beat Emperor's Children with 18 Zinch Flamers?
No.
Okay, I interrupt.
No, it doesn't
Yeah,
work. Probably not. Maybe not. Yeah, that might be a little bit rough. I think you'd have to tech hard for that particular thing. But I'm assuming that doesn't exist, and I'm hoping like people are decent about it. But I know they're not going to be.
yeah.
Um, so okay, assuming okay, Emperor's Children plus Flames doesn't exist, but I think it beats Emperor's Children, and I think it beats Creations of Bile,
Okay.
which is extremely powerful thing to say, but it immediately loses to Tau Empire with Sunshark Bombers. And
Is it?
across a 3-day event, I can't play that life. It's impossible. So maybe I'll play the Eldar. I've got to still like spend the next few hours like thinking about it and seeing does it matter if I win this? I don't, or do I just want to play something I really want to experiment with? Maybe I could even pioneer the Swift Strikes Eldar list in the world. You
Hey,
never know.
the
So
Pioneer.
um, yeah. Otherwise, it would have to be playing around with the Chaos Space Marine
Yep.
list,
You think
and
you'd change it very much? Not really, right?
yeah, I think there's a few things. I mean, I still need to sit down and play around with all of the points, but I almost want to just. I definitely don't want to add any possessed, but I think I might potentially add a third Venom Crawler into the list.
Yeah.
Because
Really?
I think those work really nicely. The additional speed adds a lot in UKTC.
Third Venom Crawler.
Uh,
Wow, I was thinking about cutting one maybe. Third one.
oh no no no,
Wow.
go up. I think I would potentially swap a Noise Marine unit to another Venom Crawler.
What?
Uh,
What?
I know, weird, but I think the flow of the game will work a little bit better with that.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So
I'm
yeah,
with
I mean we'll see. I wouldn't play it on any heavier terrain than UKTC terrain, but UKTC for some reason the Venom Crawlers just slide into
you.
spaces so beautifully.
Vic, so if you were going to take, it sounds like to me you're in kind of two buckets. You've got one where you can potentially win Best Eldari. Okay, great. And then you've got other, which is if you want to win the tournament. Which army are you taking if you want to win the tournament?
Oh, I think for consistency purposes, obviously, I'm extremely practiced with the Emperor's Children. I know they're strong,
Yeah.
and I'm starting to pick up all the little tricks. So it's gonna be a really like 50-50 decision. I've got all of the models in front of me for both armies. Like I'm ready to go. I don't even have to do any hobby work. So I'm gonna sit down and do it. I think Chaos Space Marines is probably the sensible choice, but it's also a little bit of a boring choice. I think they're gonna be quite popular at this event. So I'd like to innovate a little bit if possible. So you
Yep.
guys, I guess we'll find out within a week's time. I mean, same question back to you, Dave. Where are we sitting with
Oh
everything?
man, I'm on the fence. Oh, I'm on the fence so bad. Oh man, I want to play demons so
You
bad.
should do it, man. Do it.
Oh god, this is the funny. I guess this, an insight into my mind. Is that like I want to play demons so badly. I feel like I will have a great time at the tournament if I play demons. I don't know if it is the best faction for me to play to win the tournament though, because I've also got Leviathan. That's how many times I've played it. I've also got Kraken Tyranids as well, and I've been chatting a lot with Jokul Jokulson. I'm going to butcher his name there. Sorry, but from Team Iceland about Tyranids. We started chatting when he used my list for the Invitational one that I won leads with. He's a really great guy, and he's been playing Kraken while I've been on holiday a lot on UKTC, and we've been chatting a lot about Kraken. And so Kraken didn't get nerfed at all, aside from the Reaper side nerf. So Kraken Tyranids, I think, are quite good. I think they are good, and I think the fact that we had so much success with Leviathan in UKTC kind of overshadowed how strong Kraken actually still is. So, oh, man, I mean, so guys, my demons list. Fuck.
They're staring at you. They're
Uh,
staring at you, waiting for their chance.
Oh man, my demons list is actually pretty sick. I like it.
It's really good.
It's a bloodthirster, phase capped, 5 up, feel no pain. So he's warlord. Relic for +1 damage, ignore hit and wound modifiers, which is actually ignoring wound modifiers is great against terminators. You win them on 2 still.
Mhm.
You wouldn't hit on 4s, but you win on 2s. And then it's got Be'lakor as just a patrol, not a warlord. It's got 40 bloodletters. It's got demon. It's got a change caster for the flamers that are about to come. It's got a demon prince of Nurgle, non with just walking, and then he's got the relic for ignore wound caps, so ignore phase caps +1 damage. So he actually he cranks pretty hard actually, and he's a third psyker as well, so he can do your psychic secondaries. And he goes to T7 on the Nurgle demon prince, so it's quite good. I've got one skull cannon. A little skull cannon. I've been playing 2 skull cannons a lot recently, but I wanted to try and make the demon prince work. So as a third secondary there, so the skull cannon is actually quite good. It's not bad. It's not bad. It fills a role in demons that you really don't have, which is that you've got something on the backfield that can sit and hold it and contribute long range as well. So it's actually quite it's a lot like a venom crawler, you know. Whereas Chaos Space Marines you don't need that role as much, but for demons you kind of do. And
Mhm.
it's actually just 4 up and vulnerable save, 9 wounds, T7. Like I mean, it's not fun to get.
Solid.
Yeah, it's not easy to kill. 4 up and vulnerable, like go. And its melee's really good too. And then I've got I think I've got a mix of 6 flamers, 5 flamers, 4 flamers,
Mhm.
something like that. I think the 6 flamers is good, but you also want the 5 man unit so you can coherency deploy along deep strike lines quite easily and stuff. Yeah, so oh my god, I really want to play demons, man. Like, but give me your honest opinion. Do you think demons can beat Chaos Space Marines?
Yes.
Do you? And is it by attacking the Noise Marines on the side and playing the edges of the board?
I think it's purely by being a good player. Like these kinds of games where, I mean, I think Tyranids personally had a power advantage, right? I think equal skill level, the Leviathan Nids list was going to beat the Emperor's Children list. And
Yeah,
me and Alexandra, who won LGT, were both saying exactly the same thing. We didn't want to hit Lucas in that top 4 and have to deal with his Leviathan Nids.
yeah,
So now we're at the stage where Emperor's Children you're not going to have a list advantage on Emperor's Children, but you are going to have the ability to win games potentially. And I think Demons is an exact example of that. You have something that ignores phase caps, you have Deep Strike, you have Flamers, you have everything that can kill the Noise Marines all the way around the sides and ways of getting to the Noise Marines.
uh
And, you know, it's kind of hard to kill demons back. I think
yeah. Demon
the
save.
shoot, yeah, demon save all the way around, and Be'lakor is a pain for Emperor's Children to try and deal with.
And
You,
you can teleport him out as well, which is kind of nice. So if
100%.
you get him targeted, you can teleport him out from the.
I think if you leverage all the tricks and all your core game knowledge, there is no reason why armies like demons can't beat Emperor's Children, even at equal skill level. Is my take.
Can demons beat Tau?
Demons should beat Tau. I think. I
With
think
the
that's
face
right.
that bloodthirster, it's quite nice.
Yeah, and I think the 3+ invulns on the Flamers is very difficult for them to deal with. I think across the board, Tau have a challenging game against demons. So, I mean, we didn't really talk about that before, but I think demons actually come out of this as potentially one of the stronger armies. Now,
Oh, don't say it. Oh,
they they do have this thing where you need to be a relatively good player to play the deep striking elements of this army correctly and to understand what to deep strike and where to deep strike them. And I think that's really not obvious. It's not very easy at all, even
no,
though
it's
you have flexibility. Because if you get it wrong and the blood letters all just disappear, which they can very easily do,
not. Yeah,
you really run out of stuff very, very quickly in the Demon's army.
yeah, I agree. But I think that the demons, as I just talked about, I think you've actually got quite a good threat saturation.
Hmm.
You've got I'm just thinking purely into Chaos Space Marines right now, and this just goes exactly what I said before around like if you're on the top of the meta, people will be thinking about you. You've got Be'lakor, which is a pain in the ass to deal with. You've got because he turns off rerolls to hit and he's -1 to hit, so very tough to kill him. You've also got got a Bloodthirster who's actually pretty hard to kill as well.
Hmm.
He can one tap Terminators as well, if you want to go that way. And then you got the Flamers, which are they're okay into Chaos Space Marines. But then you've got the 40 Bloodletters. They do line up well against Noise Marines. I wouldn't be surprised if Bloodletters kill a unit of Noise Marines straight up.
Oh, easily. Yes, they do.
Yeah, which is that's pretty good. That's not bad. That's not bad. So, it's definitely, and actually the demon secondary, I think the demon secondary where you get points for every time a model flees, and you get points if you exceed their leadership when you kill the unit. I secretly think this is a very hot take. I secretly think this is a very good secondary,
Hmm.
and it's in
I
the good
agree.
prisoner category. Because let's just think about it this time. It gives you a VP every time you kill an enemy unit because you're lowering their leadership by probably 2 anyway. So you have a good chance of that. And every time a model flees, actually Emperor's Children's models, they can run. You kill 4 Noise Marines. This is actually ideal. You kill 4 Noise Marines and they're at -2 leadership. They go from 8 to 6, is it?
9 to 6 on the sergeant.
9 to
Nine to
7.
seven. Sorry.
Sorry, 9 to
Uh,
7. So that you
yeah.
kill 4, they fail on a 4 plus. And then the last one
Definitely.
runs, you get a point for them running, and then you get a point because you destroyed a unit if you exceed their leadership. So that's your in place of banners. So you could potentially outscore them on banners too, which is interesting. Yeah, all right. I'm going to do it. I'm going to fucking do it, mate.
I mean, let me give you a counter argument to doing
Okay,
it. All
good.
right, just bring you back down 1 second. So, I don't think you have as much comprehensive knowledge of demons as
Yeah,
you do have of nids.
exactly right.
And the way the meta is sitting at the moment, I think expertise in a faction is so incredibly powerful because nothing is really broken strong at the
Yeah,
moment. As good as Emperor's Children are, they're not broken. They're just very, very good. So, faction expertise is a factor as well. And this is a big thing which is potentially putting me off taking the Eldar. As much as I had like a great run with Hail of Doom and I understand the faction very well, I don't have much experience playing the Swift Strikes list.
yeah,
Realistically, I'm less than 10 games.
yeah.
And potentially you're the same with demons.
Yes, I am the same. Yeah, I'm listening to
Yeah.
you games right now. Yeah, but how many? So the thing is, when do I get back from holiday? I get from holiday probably like I've probably only got 3 days where I can practice with demons. Realistically, 3 days.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is a choice between being sensible and being cool. It's a tough one, really tough
Tough
one.
one, mate. I've honestly been thinking about this for like week and a half, like which I'm playing demons or Tyranids here. Because Kraken, I think Kraken has actually got 2x3 zones ropes, has a good shot into Emperor's Children as well, um, with
Oh,
quite a lot of psychic output.
yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, 100%. So much stuff has a good game into Emperor's Children, Dave.
I mean, that's the one element that's good into it. The rest of the element is, is just okay. But I don't have
Yeah.
a lot of games with Kraken either. That's the thing, and I'm gonna need to get source some models as well. But yeah, I'm doing it. I'm gonna play demons.
All right.
I'm
Very
thinking right
cool.
here.
And
I'm playing
you
demons.
know, I think we need to like step back and think about everything. And I think we've covered a lot of really interesting thoughts in this podcast episode. And I don't know if there were any other final thoughts you had, Dave, that you wanted to share.
No, I just hope that all my stuff makes its deep track charges in Coventry.
100%. Shouldn't be a problem until you play against me. Let's go.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. This is a little bit of a hot take on the Balance Dataslate, and then we'll try and get this out tomorrow morning, and well, tonight even, and then yeah, we hope that we'll be seeing lots of the listeners in Coventry as well, and we'll probably be chatting, maybe make another episode before Coventry, depending. But we had a great time meeting everyone at LGT as well, so we hope that we'll sure we will be meeting lots of the listeners in Coventry.
Yeah, brilliant, guys. And, obviously, this is our immediate hot take. So we would love to hear in the comment section or get in touch with us and just give us your opinion on everything. And maybe together we can all come up with the right idea of where everything's going to sit going forward.
Yeah,
And that, everyone, is episode 5 of 40K Fireside. Thank you for joining us and see you at the next one.
see you in the next one. Thank you for listening to the 40k Fireside podcast. Vic and I hope you've enjoyed listening, and we greatly appreciate any feedback that you can provide after the show.